Right, shall we start?
Yeah. Okay. Right. When you are diagnosed with something, if it is right, then your symptoms have brought you to this diagnosis. So the doctor has, given you what you need to stand by their diagnosis, but you have brought in the symptoms. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if there is ever a case that people live up to their diagnosis.
Yeah.
For instance, nowadays you have an awful lot of ADHD and autism. You have an awful lot. It's gone from something like 1 in 250,000 people to 1 in 14. Right? I don't, figures are figures. I got that off the interweb.
Yeah.
Possibly, whatever. But what I'm saying is there a possibility that you have something wrong with you? You go to the doctor, and because of their lack of training, because GPs, yes, they train for 7 years, but there's a lot of gaps. Nutrition is one.
Mm-hmm.
Ask your wife.
Yes, absolutely.
And, things that worry me are mental health conditions. Parasuggestion is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So all about a study that was done in 1973 that supports that and almost proves it.
It sort of does, and we'll come on to people questioning it when we've gone through it, I guess. But yeah, David Rosenhan, 1973.
Good year. Good year for
Good year for the Roses. He arranged for 8 completely healthy people to be admitted into psychiatric units, claiming they could hear voices.
Did the psychiatric units know anything about the spurious nature?
No, they didn't, and that's one of the criticisms now, is that it wasn't a fair test because they didn't know that they were being tested, and
I think that makes it a fair test.
Yeah, we'll come on to the questioning of that later.
Okay.
So these 8 people, random, teacher, painter and decorator, random normal people, turned up at this various psychiatric units saying they could hear voices.
Okay.
Admitted on that basis with that diagnosis of, I guess with a diagnosis that they've got a mental health disorder. And then as soon as they were admitted, they then stopped the lie, said, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm totally fine. And were all kept in that psychiatric unit and were treated for the condition that they were deemed to have, even though they were claiming that they were fine. And I think they were kept in their units anything between 12 and 52 days.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they were saying...
What country is this in, do you know?
Okay.
Is it America or is it England?
I
think it's America.
think it's America.
Okay. So first questions are, right, this guy, Ronan, is somebody involved in mental health care, presumably. Yeah. So he sent in 8 people, and the narrative was lie to get in and then tell the truth.
Yeah.
Trouble with that is you've set precedent, haven't you? You've set precedent telling somebody, now, because you're in there, were they hoping the staff would notice the change? Because there is a chance that once you have been deemed, say, in psychosis, that decision's already been made.
Yeah.
So nobody's going to push back on that. They're going to try and treat it.
Yeah.
And also, if you go and suddenly say, I'm okay now.
Yeah. That's what a mentally unwell person would say, isn't it?
Yeah. So you're trapped. So you would probably then be diagnosed as a sociopath who can blank everything to get what they want, which is to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's important to say that I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I just think it's a really interesting topic to cover. And the inference is that they're treating the diagnosis and not treating the person. And they're continuing to do that. And obviously that's potentially incredibly dangerous.
Right. This was in 73.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you have a thing called the DSM-3, which is how they diagnose things. But still, are we suggesting that this might happen today as well?
I don't see any reason why it couldn't. And I think I've spoken to you privately before about Frank Bruno's view on his treatment being sectioned, which was very similar to my dad. From what I remember of it, when he was sectioned multiple times when I was a kid and when I was a grown-up, and still very similar to my mate who was sectioned 3 years ago, where that's it, you're in, you're medicated, you're turned into a zombie for 30 days so that they don't have to deal with you. Private viewpoint. But so, and at any time during that you could say whatever you like, and your statements and your comments are dismissed because, no, sorry, Mr. Whatever, you are being treated now. What you say doesn't matter. And that concerns me a lot.
So also, how do you get released then? If you're on a...
Well, when you're sectioned, you've got to be in for 30 days, haven't you? 31 days.
Well, it's a 20-day section. The section 20 is 20 days. Section 30 is 30 days. There's a section 5 as well, which is 5 days under observation. Right. So if you're sectioned, you will be in a unit for 48 hours at least, right? If they think that it's not, that big a thing, it's not that deal, then they will let you go into a crisis team, or if you're completely normal, they will just let you out.
Yeah.
I have absolutely no understanding or knowledge of how our mental health unit works, apart from people that we know that have been there. What I will say is, it's not treatment; it's downtime. Because how can you treat something you don't know what it is?
Yeah, exactly. So back on that experiment, the one thing that I think is incredibly interesting from when it was done was that the doctors didn't notice, but the other patients did.
Yeah, I read that bit. So not necessarily just doctors, the staff, that everyone, no one noticed that they were completely cognizant, completely able to form argument, right? When you're in psychosis, things tend not to be real. So you have a different narrative to the one that is in front of you, right? If all of a sudden there is clarity in the room, it's really hard to ignore that.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, it's not your job to challenge it.
Yeah.
The other patients, however, I think it made me chuckle in a way. It was just like, you're a fraud. You're not really in psychosis because I can tell.
Yeah.
It's like a prisoner. You're in a prison and you end up talking about you're a flipping grass. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. This ain't a grass. This is something you shouldn't even be here. Because there's some pride in the rest of the inmates or the patients or whatever. That tickled me a little bit. Obviously, it's not funny. But if you think about it, the best people to diagnose people who are struggling mentally are people who are struggling mentally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because their reality is very different from ours.
Yeah, and also, now you say that, the people around them, right? So I could tell when my dad was ill before he got admitted, right? For just various things. His eyes would start to get sort of sunken in his face. I could tell by his breathing. He used to go in the bathroom in the morning. This is when I was a kid. And I could tell from his breathing, right, this is going downhill. And within a month, he'd be sectioned and off he'd go.
So what, heavy breathing? Or laboured?
Laboured breathing, yeah. So everything was, you could tell, just when he was getting washed, it was like, you could just tell everything was an effort. How does that make you feel, knowing what's coming? I'm talking like 10 years old here as well. Yeah. Like a young kid.
Everything is on your sleeve as well. You know what's coming. So the anxiety is on the front of your face rather than the back of your head.
Yeah. And I don't think about that very often. But and weirdly, he would often get admitted during the night. So he'd say to my mum, I can't move, or whatever. He's taking some tablets or whatever. And I just have this memory of the ambulance turning up and then putting him in. He'd be upstairs. They put him in like a chair stretcher thing, and strap him in and carry him down the stairs. Yeah, and that was like it was almost a relief, I guess, when that happened, because at least
there's an end.
Yeah, you sort of get back to normal. But anyway, So there's a lot. Obviously, whenever we talk about anything about psychiatric units, it always triggers stuff with my dad. Yeah. And before I forget to say this, the other thing that came into my head with that is almost the opposite of it. Was that my dad? I'll say the last time. It wasn't the last time he was admitted. The last time when he was a working man that he got admitted into a psychiatric unit, he faked it, and he admitted it a number of years later.
Why? To what end?
He was working. He was basically, his ability to do his job was declining. His ability to see well, his ability to machine stuff to the fraction of a millimetre and stuff was declining. Yeah. And he didn't really know how to get out of that because it's what he'd done for 40 years. Yeah. And he said he stood at his workbench at the little industrial unit up in Hoddesdon that he used to work at and started banging two bits of metal together. And eventually someone noticed and went, oh, something wrong with Pete. we'll call an ambulance.
And they knew Pete's past.
They knew his past and went, oh, looks like he's not quite right. And he got admitted, and he would have been, probably would have been sectioned, I don't know.
To keep him, they'd have had to have sectioned.
Yeah. And he was admitted, and that was that was the end of his working career. He kind of, it sort of, his his plan worked, because he then got signed off and said, you're not capable of working anymore. And he took early retirement on ill health grounds. And
right. So
you can decide to fool the system that way round if you're kind of giving into it.
If you've been through the system enough times, which sadly your dad was, you know how to play it.
Yeah,
it's, you know, there are people I know who play the benefit system to their abilities, to the point where they can get anything they want at any point. And I think any system is there to be broken. You know, hackers, you know, the computer systems that they can hack through to get what they want. It's the same game.
Yeah.
Once you get knowledge, you can manipulate anything.
Yeah,
I can't, because I'm a bit dumb as far as computers go. But I'd like to have a little look at the reality of being on a wing when you're not in psychosis. I wonder how bad that is, because they'll want you to take your meds, so you'll be tranquilized. You will be sedated. You will be lethargic, and the only thing is once you've been medicated, showing that you're not in psychosis or in trouble mentally would be nigh on impossible.
Well, yeah, and there's a film in the back of my head, I'm not sure what it is, it might even be one of the Hunger Games ones or something, where a woman is saying, look, there's nothing wrong with me. And because they keep ignoring her, she gets angry. And because she gets angry, they say, well, clearly there's something wrong with you because you're getting angry. Yeah. I could see myself being like that. It's like, look, you're not listening to me. There is nothing wrong with me. And you can imagine that becoming...
Halle Berry?
Could be, yeah, could be.
And she was a mental health doctor or something.
Yeah.
Like that. I haven't seen it. I've seen the advert.
No, I think you're right. Yeah.
And it was that Limp Bizkit song, Behind Blue Eyes, the cover of the Who song. See, where does my brain get this rubbish? What's exciting about something like that is the fact that this man decided to play it and show how bad diagnosis as a wide-ranging thing is.
Yeah.
Now, he succeeded in a limited fashion. There's another part of this as well where after he'd finished...
Yeah.
So the doctors criticised him. They said, well, you didn't let us know. How are we supposed to know? He said, well, that's the whole fucking point, isn't it? If I let you know, you're going to play the game.
Yeah.
So what does he do?
They said, okay, we'll do it again. Randomly send some people, and we know that they're coming, and then we will attempt to find them for you.
The term pseudo-patients.
Yeah, that's what they call them. Yeah,
is important.
Yeah.
So how many? So he sent what they
identified over the coming weeks or months. They identified 40 people that they said there's nothing wrong with these people.
Yeah,
we've found your plants.
Right,
and it turns out he hadn't sent any at all.
There's the twist. So he told them he planted. You see,
I don't think he told them he wasn't. I think he went. Yeah, I will. Okay, I'll do that.
Pseudo patients.
Yeah.
Right. So the key to this, right, is the power of suggestion. If I was talking about this with my colleague Anne, who works in juggling, who is a fucking superstar, right? She's just had really bad health problems and now is through that, and that's amazing. So I'm really glad she's back. But the reason I'm talking about it, she is training and to do a doctorate in psychotherapy. So she's it.
Yeah.
And I said, what about this? And I got all excited to talk about it. And she went, yeah, you see, the power of suggestion is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Right. And the way I see it, if head office phones me up and said, look, we're going to put a fake client in to see what's really going on with your clients in the thing.
Yeah.
Right. And then they don't, the next client I get, I'm going to treat differently because my brain thinks, actually, I'm not because I don't give a shit. But my brain thinks that I'm being judged and looked at. They say it's for client. I know damn well they're looking at me, even if they're not. Yeah. So your brain changes, right? So they weren't looking for patients. They were looking for pseudo patients that did not exist.
Yeah.
So that tripped them up. So they found 40 people in these pseudo patients that actually didn't get treated and got turned away.
Well, I think they got seen as intruders or whatever, and I don't know the full details of that, but to me that's a good thing because those people were being treated and maybe they didn't need to be treated or didn't need to be admitted, and therefore they were released and probably should have been. That's how I see it, but then maybe I'm looking at it from a half full
Well, I don't see it that way. I see it that these people, right, who went there with a real problem, the preconception was none of these people have a problem. They're all pseudo patients, right? That's negative, because the people who actually came along, they would have been diagnosed a hell of a lot more critically and negatively.
I think maybe they wouldn't have been in 1973 though. I don't know. These days maybe, but that's still someone's opinion, isn't it? It's still someone's opinion as to that they've got that.
Right. So nowadays you've got Signet House, right, locally for mental health, right? And I'll tell you this now, I have nothing but contempt for that place, and I'll say that I don't care, right? What happens there is there are people, and I'm not going to say the link to me, there are people who have gone there for genuine help, for genuine reasons, and been told that their desperate need is not desperate enough. And then that same person has gone on to hurt themselves.
Yep.
I'm not going to bring in details because it's no point, but when you have power of that level to suggest that people are not being truthful or have an agenda above and beyond their mental health, or they're not sick enough to get help, right? What's going on? You have funding to look at mental health, be that as someone who's sad and, you know, showing his depression, because a lot of people think that being sad is being depressed, and it's really not.
No.
Also, bipolar is thrown around a lot, but most of the time bipolar isn't bipolar. It's, you know, borderline personality disorder, where they're different, and you know, it goes on. Or the other way around, you don't have bipolar, it's not serious enough, and then, you know, lo and behold, psychotic episode. I understand, and I would like to say that I think mental health workers have the hardest time, because it's the new bad back.
Oh God, yeah.
You cannot prove or disprove either way, right? You cannot categorically say that somebody is or is not mentally unwell. Right, mostly because the patterns are so varied and wide. So psychosis, if you're in psychosis, right, you're disjointed, you're manic, or super not manic, you know, you're telling a narrative that doesn't exist, you're, you know, but often people paint that as making up a story, and you know, you're doing this and things aren't quite right and you're wacky and you're this. There's no attractive side to being, you know, psychotic.
No.
Being in psychosis, there is no, you know, it's not One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Do you know what I mean? Like, Jack Nicholson isn't sitting there running the fucking wing, right? These places are stark, horrible, bare, and the people in control of it are so burnt out that sometimes I don't think they give a shit whether somebody's really in trouble or not.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
And that worries me. But also, on the plus side of that, maybe they're right. Maybe the person in front of them isn't. But they're crying out for help and support. And then they're dismissed. So then, because of that power of suggestion, they're like spiraling. No one's listening to me. No one's helping me. I'm going to go down this cruel, nasty alleyway where no one's going to pick me up.
Yeah, so what did they need in the first place? They needed
Support.
someone to listen, didn't they?
That's it. And do you know why charities like ours are so busy? Because we will stop and listen.
Yeah.
And we will make sure we do. I like the idea of the pseudo patients.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing, right? But the trouble with that is the power of suggestion enables them to hyper look at everyone who comes in.
Yeah.
And that negativity comes from the fact that they're not looking for patients. They're looking for pseudo patients. So therefore, they are dismissing people who are in trouble.
Yeah.
And that worries me, but it was 1973, so then people are sorting out now.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just interesting. That takes me on to another lady called Suzanne O'Sullivan, who has written a book about the fact that, in her opinion, we're now over-diagnosing. We're over-medicalising everything.
Yeah. Define over-medicalising. What, meaning that the smaller problems are not mental health there, or not needing medicine?
Yeah, there's lots to it. So when it comes to we're keen now to get a diagnosis. What whether that's cancer, whether that's mental health disorders, whether that's autism, whether that's diabetes. We're keen to catch things early because that's deemed to be good. But in the end, we medicalise people that don't need to be medicalised.
Yeah, but also catching things early means that people will take pills for longer.
Yes, I was potentially not going to go down that route, but yeah, let's do that. So her point is that, and I guess that's really where we keep coming back to here, is whether diagnosis is a good thing or a bad thing in the first place. Now,
I've never thought about that.
Yeah, and nor is she, but she now thinks it's a bad thing in many circumstances. So as soon as you give someone a diagnosis, you potentially instantly change their life.
Is that because if they don't have what the diagnosis is, or even if they do, they will live up to that diagnosis?
People can do that. Yeah, it becomes something that you live up to. So the story that she told was there was a lady that had Huntington's disease, which is a neurological degenerative disease. And if you've got Huntington's disease, you have a 50% chance, or if your parent has it, you've got a 50% chance of inheriting it.
Super.
Okay.
Right.
This woman was diagnosed when her child was 15, I think.
Okay.
And so instantly, this doctor, Suzanne O'Sullivan, said, well, we better test your daughter then, so that she can be prepared for if this happens to her in 30 years' time. Okay?
Yeah.
So they diagnosed the daughter. They tested the daughter, and they said, yeah, looks like a strong chance you'll develop Huntington's disease as well. And as that young girl grew up, 10, 15, 20 years later, she started to experience the symptoms.
Right.
Right? Sorry, she chose not to have the test, right? But she started to get the symptoms. So went and got tested because she could see that she thought she was going the same way as her mum and had been for quite some time. And then got tested and she didn't have it. Okay.
Right. So the power of suggestion.
But the inference was, well, you got 50% chance of getting it. Meant that was over her head the whole time. So every time anything happened, so she started to trip over things was one of the symptoms that she had, because you start to lose your spatial awareness. Started to get irritable with people, another symptom. But her tripping over things and her being irritable weren't actually symptoms of Huntington's. They were
just life
symptoms
things.
of other things, yeah.
Right.
So she felt really bad about it, because she said, I affected that person by giving that diagnosis, or that potential diagnosis, even a hint of a diagnosis.
Yeah.
It's affected that person's life forever.
Yeah. It should be said, though, if she'd have had the test, she'd have known that she didn't have it.
Well, she said, actually, a really interesting statistic. Back when she was doing that 20 odd years ago, there wasn't a test. And everyone that had the sort of advanced symptoms said, if I'd had the chance to have a test, I'd have taken the test.
Yeah.
She said now 80 to 90% of people that have got a parent with Huntington's disease refuse to take the test.
Because they don't want to be defined by that disease.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I get that.
So having the hope of not having it is a stronger emotion than getting a positive test and thinking, in 20 years' time, I'm going to start to decline.
I can relate to this a little bit. Obviously, my mother died of multiple sclerosis.
Yeah.
And I remember being told that it's mostly girls on girls' side that get this, but then there's loads of men around. And I thought, okay. And I went to my doctor about a year afterwards and said, am I going to get this? And he said, well, there's a possibility of it.
Yeah.
So for the next year or so, I didn't walk around going, I'm going to get MS. But I had, I've gone blank. What's that? Sciatica.
Yeah.
In my left leg. So I went to Amsterdam, of all places, and I was walking down there in the snow, and suddenly my left leg went numb, right, which is one of the things that happens. And I suddenly thought, fuck, that's it. I'm done.
Beginning of the end.
And then a friend of mine was with me who just happens to be a doctor, and we were pretty pissed. And I said what happened out loud, and he said, you're a fat bloke, yeah, with a bad back. And I went, yeah. And he said, it's more likely to be sciatica than it is MS, because, you're young and all that. And I went, okay, well, that's good. And then I got sober, got on the plane back home and went, okay, right. So you need to change your thinking. But bearing in mind, I've not done any of the training I've done now, but my thought process was, if I think this way, I'm going to get it. And that was a puerile thing, you know? And I remember thinking, right, I have to decide that this isn't happening. So then I went to the doctor and said, I want the test, like, because there is a test for MS. And or was then. And the doctor went, well, I told you that there's not much chance of getting. I said, I don't give a flying monkeys. I want to know, because then I'm going to draw a line. Had the test, lo and behold, I don't have it. But the power of suggestion.
Yeah.
And he'd said, no, you're not going to get it. It's mostly in girls and blah, blah. But then I knew men that had it. So nowadays, I'm not living in that anymore. So luckily, I was quite cognizant about everything, which is massively wonderful considering how off my tits I was the whole time. But yeah, I mean, you know, sciatica's a thing that a lot of people get. It's painful nerve, usually down your left leg. Your leg goes a bit numb and your bum cheek hurts with the numbness and all of that. But that, sadly, is a ongoing problem with multiple sclerosis. I think if you're told something by someone you perceive has power in knowledge, i.e. a doctor, a nurse, a dentist, you know, even a fucking some geezer who's decided to open a pharmacy, right, who now is being shown as the light to go to should you have something. Go to the pharmacist. He will mend all because there's no money in the NHS. There's no money in the NHS, you pricks, because you've stolen it all, right? So why not fuck off and then fuck off?
There's
anyway,
that.
Right, so in about 1980, diagnosis, right, was inconsistent. Like, diagnosis had no benchmark.
Of mental health issues.
Yeah, of mental health. So there was no way to understand before 1980 that diagnosis had to be, you know, streamlined and made into a system. So then after that, there was the creation of a thing called the DSM-3. That was in 1980, which is cleaner, clearer criteria, you know, symptom checklists.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if you like the idea of linear ways of diagnosing things, i.e. if you fit into these little boxes, then we can diagnose. Now, this was seen because of the symptoms checklist instead of vague ideas. So, for instance, when those people who said, I can hear voices, went in, there would have been a wider criteria of things after 1980.
Yeah.
Right. But some would tell you that this was done because of Rosenhan study. Rosenhan. I can never remember his name, man.
Rosenhan.
I barely remember mine sometimes. So what you have to understand is that this might have been poo-pooed as a study that wasn't right because there wasn't enough notes taken. There wasn't enough inside of the facility.
Yeah, there wasn't a control group, all of the stuff that you...
Yeah, but also... he got 8 people through who all got diagnosed, kept and sedated and made to stay on the wing, right? That's 8 people. 4 of them, right, the law of averages would say that 2 of them should have been kicked off and turned back, right? They weren't. All of them were swallowed whole. Then that's, never mind. Austin Powers, never mind. Pseudo patients arrived. And now that's the key for me. That's what makes it fucking interesting.
Yeah.
I've told you there are going to be 10 pseudo patients coming through your services, right? But I'm not going to tell you when. So every one of them, every single person that comes through, apart from Mr. Batshit Crazy, who's just eaten a candle in front of you and said, like me, I'm on fire, you know, I apologise for the comedic value of that, but
we don't use words like crazy.
Point. Huh?
We don't use words like crazy anymore.
Oh, do we not?
Apparently not.
I do. No, I don't with my clients. I think I did call someone crazy today.
Okay. I'm not going to get too hot up on that.
No. It wasn't anyone in the group or any of my clients.
Okay.
I called it was in the car park.
Oh, okay. Are you crazy?
I just said, what are you, crazy?
Crazy mofo?
Yeah, no, I didn't actually. I said, are you crazy? You just almost backed into me is what I said.
Oh, okay. That's
so
very,
I've used that word.
Very polite of you.
Fair enough. Yeah, there were no Fs or Cs
Christ.
or implied violence either, which I think I'm growing up finally.
Fantastic.
So look, the narrative is, and you took it as a positive, that those people weren't, you know, there was no wrongful diagnosis. I put it the other way because I'm more negative than you.
Yeah, maybe.
So I'm spinning it that those pseudo patients, right, that did not exist, created a heightened sense of tension on diagnosis. So therefore, people who were genuinely not well were batted out, going, no, you're a pseudo patient. It's good you.
Yeah.
Now, if you tell somebody who's in psychosis they're a pseudo patient, you're giving them a license to be a spy, right, in their psychotic episode. They're like undercover then, aren't they? They go out into the street and do whatever, spies do, if you want to play it to the nth degree. Yeah. You're giving them, you're ignoring their mental health.
Yeah, whereas I see that they've dismissed an earlier misdiagnosis. That's how I see it.
Yeah, but how do you see that?
Because I don't trust people to diagnose properly.
Oh, okay. Well, that fucking answers that question, doesn't it? Okay, right. So after 1980, right? So Rosenhan didn't cause this change, this whatever it was called, the DSM-3, right?
Yeah.
Didn't cause that, but he was pointing at the real issue, which was this weird. I tell you what, depending on which psychiatrist was running the wing that night, depends on whether you get there or not.
Yeah.
Right, and that can't be that. So they're apparently right. So American psychiatrists diagnose schizophrenia more often when they did a thing called the US-UK Diagnostic Project, which was in the 70s, right? British psychiatrists diagnose mood disorders instead, right? So the difference in country meant, well, Americans, you're schizophrenic, you've got a mood disease, right? So same symptoms, different country, different label. Yeah. That's interesting as well. Okay, so that backs up, Rosenhan's claim that diagnosis was culturally influenced. Yeah. Now, if you can be influenced by culture, you can be influenced by situation. Mm-hmm. And also, we all know the power of suggestion. Like somebody comes up and whispers in your ear, "Oh, I love a pork pie." Right? The next thing you're thinking is, "Fucking hell, I want a pork pie."
Yeah.
And I just think that the power of suggestion is often overlooked. I think a lot of my work, right, one-to-ones, mentoring, is I break what people have seen in cycles for themselves, and I give them a different way of looking at something. So we use reframing to break the cycle. Yeah. Well, is that not a heightened form of power of suggestion?
I'd say it's exactly a power of suggestion, but it's a suggestion of a positive thought rather than a negative one, isn't it?
Shit, I'm a charlatan.
No, it's good. That's the point, isn't it? Is that you're presenting a different perspective.
If you present, right, I am not there for solutions. The solutions are already present in the client. Yeah. But if I show you a different way of thinking that can get you to the solution you already know exists, that's what I do. Yeah. So if you're
as you said before, sorry to cut across you, but it's giving them permission to think outside of what their downward spiral has taken them to, isn't it?
Yeah. And also, bear in mind, to be stuck in a rut or a cycle, you don't have to be miserable about it. No. You don't even... a lot of people don't even recognise they will go through their whole working life in the same rut and be totally happy with it. Yeah. But if your brain suddenly realises that you have done the same damn thing for 45 years and you've fucking had enough of it, right, then all of a sudden you're seen as challenging your narrative. Challenging your narrative is the single most important thing you can do. Yeah. Because it means you check in with yourself. And I think that's important. Yeah. So, if you... Right, there was a guy, there was labelling theory research, a guy called Thomas Schoff.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Okay, so being labelled mentally ill can change how others treat you. Yeah. And eventually how you behave. So this is my point, right? Diagnosed individuals often internalise labels.
Yeah, instead of absolutely.
Externalising.
That's why I don't like labels.
Yeah, and also right, there is a really damaging and worrying trait amongst some parents when they are desperately looking for a diagnosis. Mm. Right, now, I'm involved with a family that all three children do have huge traits of one has autism, one has both, one has ADHD. Right. But they are fucking textbook. Yep. Yeah? And their behavioural traits are severe. Yep. So... getting a diagnosis will help them. I am not criticising the diagnosis problem for them.
No, and that's the whole point of this, and the whole point of the book that Suzanne O'Sullivan has written. It's not saying that diagnoses aren't valid.
But the mass search for diagnosis as a cure,
Yeah.
or the road to cure is misguided. There are many parents who seem, and I mean, in my son's primary school, I saw parents reaching for a diagnosis to stop anyone throwing stones at their badly behaved kids because they don't know how to parent.
Yeah, and that's the problem. And this over-medicalisation, she talked about how in the 1940s, I think it was, when autism was first defined, it was about an autistic aloneness, right? So it's all about social interaction and not being able to. And they said that people with this autistic aloneness feel no more to a human than they do to a shelf or a chair, right?
So they don't relate to others.
No.
Yeah.
And then we talk about people on the spectrum, that then got expanded to the autistic spectrum. And now, I think since 1998 and 2018, diagnosis of some form of autism has increased by 783%, or something ridiculous. Yeah. And now 27%, I think, of children have now got special educational needs at school.
Yeah. 27% of, wait. 27% of all children.
Yeah.
Holy shitbox.
Yeah.
Think about the amount of kids that is.
Yeah. I know.
So, yeah. I mean, I can't put a number on it.
It's more than 1 in 4.
Yeah. So I was wrong, and you have shown the way with your figures. I like being wrong. Doesn't happen often, apart from always.
But the point is that how many of those people are
actually
autistic in terms of it impacting their life, and how many of them get labelled autistic, and therefore think about the fact that they're not normal, they're abnormal, they're deficient, they can't do this, that has got to have had a massive negative impact on them and other people's opinion of them. Has it not?
Yeah. I mean, you tell, right. So say, for instance, your child behaves badly in social circumstances, right? Now, in my day, that would be called showing off, right? And my dad was heard to say quite often, "Stop showing off." And I'd be like, "What? I'm not showing off. I'm showing my brilliance of the theatre." Or I'd probably just said, "Huh?" I came from Somerset, so it's probably, "Huh?" So you tell a 6-year-old child, right, they're autistic. Okay. Yeah. Then you tell their teacher, then you tell their parents, the parents of the friends. You are labelling that child that one word.
Yeah.
Okay? Which then forever will be carrying on that little blue light above their head that shouts autistic. I challenge, right, anyone to escape from that. Now, if they're autistic, great. But how autistic are they? Do they play up to that as they get older because they realise I can do whatever the fuck I want, right? Yeah. Because I'm autistic. Yeah. And no one can challenge me. So after a while, like all buzzwords, reality will set in. Yeah. So already the diagnosis machine is shut on ADHD and autism, hasn't it? They were saying that the NHS have got so many, the backlog's 4 years, so they're going to shut it until they've got through, and then you can apply again and all of this, right? Yeah. Giving that diagnosis, right, even if it is real, do you think the diagnosis is advantageous?
Is it helpful is the point, yeah. Is it helping society? That massive rise in diagnosis of autism, have we helped those people? Have we helped society?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure we have.
I can't tell you that for sure. What I can tell you is that clarity for some children is really important because it's fucking obvious. But I also know of one child where the mother screams and shouts about how this child's autistic. Yeah. And I'll tell you now, he's not. Yeah. He is just a shitbag.
Yeah, and I think that's a commonly held view, certainly of people of our generation, I think.
I do realise that there are going to be people screaming at the screen. Well, they're probably not, because our viewership is not that large. There'll be one person, and I know who that person is. So fuck you. who will be throwing bananas at the screen going, you're not qualified to make this. I am qualified because I'm a human being who lives in this world.
Yeah, and we're not saying ADHD doesn't exist. We're not saying autism doesn't exist.
No, because it fucking does. But
yeah, I just...
when does it stop being a badge of honour for parents as well?
Yeah, well, I know people of my daughter's generation who might have even said that before on the podcast, that are proud that they can't be diagnosed. They're so crazy, they're so weird, they're so different that no one can diagnose what I've got. Well, maybe you haven't got anything.
Maybe you're just a bit of a prick.
Yeah.
I remember as a teenager wanting so badly to be crazy. Right? Because my perception of crazy was exciting, dynamic, fucking manic, and really exciting. And I remember as soon as I got my motorcycle test, riding at the fucking stupid speeds everywhere because I was fucking nuts. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not nuts. I was just a bit deluded about what I wanted out of life. And incidentally, riding a ZZR 1100 to Manchester the first day I bought it, I hit a very small stone at 140 miles an hour and pooed myself. Literally. Figuratively and metaphorically, pulled over to the side of the M1, smoked literally 10 Marlboros before I could get back on that fucking motorcycle, ride the rest of the way, which was a long way, at 70 miles an hour and no more in third gear, right? Because I shit it, right? That's how crazy I was, right? I think what's important is the ability to see that this project was very flawed, right? In its capture, in its essence.
Yeah.
But what it did do is it started a snowball of questions.
Yeah.
Now, when you start questioning abilities and questioning dynamics and questioning systems, you by definition probably get growth. And if not growth, you get a heightened understanding of reality. And I think if nothing else, this shows us that you play mental long enough, right? Then, you're going to get looked at. But what this did was made that band of diagnosis, which is important.
Yeah, it's got to have impacted that 1980 decision, hasn't it?
It did. No, it certainly did. It did. And, there was, when after 1980, and they brought in that structured diagnosis interviews. So after DSM-3, right, structured interviews were introduced, right? So standardized checklists, operational criteria, right? All of a sudden, every single psychiatrist, it didn't matter if you were more interested in sitting behind your desk smoking cigars or more interested in getting more money for your project because the more clients you had, the better money you got. This was about, here is a system. Right? So Rosenhan may have been accurate for the 1970s, but less so today. But without him, we wouldn't have the system we do. I question the system these days because I live in a world where I have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And the system now is failing. And the question of that is about money.
Yeah.
And if money is what's needed to make the system well again, we are well and truly fucked. Because there will be no money. The NHS has plenty of money to run. It's the brutal fact of the matter is that they waste so much of it with 3 tiers of middle management, right? PPE in houses that will in warehouses that will never get used, but they're still paying the money on them. Look into the realities of funding for the NHS. As a charity, right, I have to deliver total clarity or I will be shut down. So why the fuck doesn't the NHS have to show all the bullshit and where they spend money? Because it would embarrass the government. That's why.
Yes, indeed.
Don't want to challenge the government. Don't want to start a riot. Don't want to kick off about Big Pharma. But what I will say is challenging the normal narrative is still and will always be important.
Yeah, definitely.
Got anything else to say?
One, I think, interesting statistic back on the over-medicalisation stuff. And you just said we won't necessarily bash pharma, but you can't not think that this has an impact on it. The statistic that was given was you can scan breast cancer, right? You can scan 2,000 women for breast cancer.
Yep.
You'll then treat 10 of them, and they'll think, wow, I'm the statistics that got saved. But only one of them would actually have gone on to fully develop breast cancer. So you're medicalising 9 people for the sake of saving 1 out of those 2,000. And I can't not think, okay, well, that's got to be driven by a desire to use more drugs, isn't it?
I think without digging a hole from here to China, what I would say is that if you ignore the narrative of money in the medical world, then you've lost it. Because the reason that the larger drug companies are able to test and run and make new drugs and dictate the price is because they are a corporate entity.
Yeah.
And by definition, corporate entities need to make profit. And they make profit. I don't know if I don't know enough about the ins and outs of the business of pharma, right? But what I will say is this: if you ignore the money, you're not going to find the truth.
Yeah.
Because truth, sadly, in this world is driven by money. Look at America. Look at the narrative of different countries going to war. The reason people love war when they're in government is because it creates so much money.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the millions of people that died.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because, or, you know, in the Second World War, you know, Russia, literally millions of people died. But that's okay because we kept, you know, our stamps right, and we got rid of the tyranny of the Nazis, which, you know, they did. But look at the cost. If someone had stood on that little vegan artist who decided to become a politician because he saw a loophole, you cannot tell me that that man was able to talk and influence this whole country, even though Germany needed a win and they needed a leader. You cannot tell me that this little man, who was nothing beforehand, was able to influence the country without other people pulling his strings and getting him where he was going. And he was clever enough to hold on to it and mad as a box of frogs by the end of it.
Yeah.
You know, so without getting too further down the timeline, because we're running out of time, I think what we're really saying by all of this is diagnoses, don't know where that goes. Because if you're diagnosed and it's a wrong diagnosis, you may well play to the diagnosis you have and ignore what you really have, which will then exacerbate the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to be careful of that label, I think, of that label becoming something that defines you rather than...
Yeah.
I mean, you can say, another thing that was said on this pod was that actually people that are, excuse the term, properly autistic, right? So people that experience that social awkwardness and stuff, they like to be called autistic because they consider that it is a fundamental part of them.
Yep.
Whereas people that are epileptic don't want to be called epileptics.
Because that's a negative narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, even within 2 different diagnoses of 2 different issues, you've got a very different perspective from whether people want to be labelled like that and don't want to be labelled like that. And I think sometimes there's too much of a desire, certainly with ADHD currently. Oh, look at me, that's my ADHD brain. There's so many people that have got self-diagnosed ADHD from a Facebook survey or something, haven't they?
Yeah.
And then refer to it continually, and then it does get a bit tiring for everyone around them, you know?
There were 3 of my friends who confronted me about a year and a half ago and said, mate, you need to get a diagnosis. You are ADHD. You're all over the place. You're doing this, you're doing that. My exact reaction was, what the fuck do you want me to do with that?
Yeah.
What do you want me to do with that? I'm 52 years old. I was 51 at the time. I know I wasn't. I was 50. I'm 50 years old. Right, I've lived my life this way. And yeah, I've been an addict and still am, but in recovery, I've fucked it all up. Do you really think that that's down to 4 initials that you've decided to give me? And if it is, do you think I'm going to miraculously change because a doctor gives me a piece of fucking paper? I don't give a shit. For me personally, I do not give a shit, because without whatever it is that drives me, I am not me, and I lose my identity. And I'd be fucked if I'll be diluted by 3 of my friends telling me that it's causing them a problem. I said, you should. And my exact reaction was, you should have met me 15 years ago. I'd have probably shot you. Right. Obviously, said for narrative's sake.
Yes. Shot.
No people were shot in the making of this podcast. We have to end. I challenge you to understand that a diagnosis does not define you. It does not give you a set of rules to live by. And if you're defined by somebody else's perception of what's wrong with you, you need to challenge it. Also, if you are mentally unwell and you need to see a professional, please do so. Because the people around you will be worried about you, so they may be able to help too. Find whoever your crisis team is. Make sure that the people get the right help. Do not hide behind diagnoses. Do not let it define you. But if you need help and care, we are not telling you not to look. Go and look for it. Seek what you need. And if you need us, you know how to get hold of me. So I'll see you next time.